For coming to our second visiting artist lecture of the fall with our very own Abdi Osman. It's really wonderful to have him here tonight. So let me just begin by saying that we would like to acknowledge the land on which the University at Buffalo operates, which is the territory of the Seneca Nation, a member of the Haudenosaunee Six Nations Confederacy. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty of Peace and Friendship, a pledge to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. It is also covered by the 1794 Treaty of Canandaigua between the United States government and the Six Nations Confederacy, which further affirms Haudenosaunee land rights and sovereignty in the state of New York. Today, this region is still the home to the Haudenosaunee people, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and share ideas in this territory. So as you probably know, Abdi is our very own faculty member, so this is a wonderful chance to get to know him a little bit better. He also has a show at El Museo in Allentown right now, so I want to shout that out. Check it out if you haven't already. And we are also lucky to have Ted Triandos, our faculty in art history, here with us tonight, and he will introduce Abdi. So please join me in welcoming Ted.
Hi everybody, nice to see you all. Some of you I recognize from my classes this semester. I'm here to introduce Abdi Osman as tonight's visiting artist speaker at UB. Before we proceed, just a note that the quotations and what follows have been edited lightly just for presentational flow. Abdi Osman is a Somali-Canadian artist who describes his multidisciplinary work as focusing on questions of Black masculinity as it intersects with Muslim and queer identities. Osman's fantastic show, which is up right now at the Buffalo Contemporary Art Gallery El Museo. I saw it last Friday. It's wonderful. Please go see it. Which explores the past 2 decades of Abdi's practice, uses photography, video, and drawing to document diverse identities among Black, queer, and transgender diasporic communities. Of the El Museo show, Osman states, quote, "It is important for me to note that my work is not fundamentally concerned with speaking back to or even finding affinity with white Western forms of sexuality, and my work is not concerned with rectifying white queer exclusions. My subjects might appear to express and hold all the recognizable patterns of Western queerness, but those apparent patterns should not be the basis for assuming a shared or common identity." Speaking of Osman's collage works of the mid-2010s, which superimpose Black queer subjects over doorways the artist photographed in the city of Istanbul, Ricky Varghese observes, quote, "The collage here acts as a gesture of displacement and emplacement simultaneously, of both loss and recuperation. Osman displaces the figures from their photographic origins and places them in a radically distinct spatial and temporal context. Osman thus attempts to override presumptions of servitude attached to geographic locations and cultural belonging, bodies that do not immediately belong or otherwise imagined to belong, and otherwise need to control." Addressing Osman's more recent public installation, Shadowboxing, in 2021, in which he projects park landscapes against the exterior window of the Archives building, located in Toronto's Gay Village. Curator Alan Walker observes, "The project, quote, builds on Osman's ongoing research surrounding the gaps between experiences and representations of queer cruising, space and place making in the city of Toronto." Walker continues, "Osman's holdings and records of queer locational fortitude speak to the countless compounded sites around us where bodies have forged connections in time and space in spite of continued realities of homophobia, racism, and white supremacy that exist in Toronto and beyond." Osman holds an MFA in documentary media from Ryerson University in Toronto. His work has been exhibited in solo and in group exhibitions such as at the Berlin Biennale, the Art Museum at the University of Toronto, the Gardner Museum, the Goethe Institute, the National Museum of Kenya, and the Center for African Contemporary Art and Culture in Germany. His work has been written about and published in academic arts and cultural studies anthologies, journals, and catalogs, including Art Feministe, Art Contemporain, Feminist Theories, Writing Black Canada, Transitions, the Journal of Canadian and the Journal of Canadian Studies. He has held fellowships and participated in artist residencies at the Interdisciplinary Center for Culture and Creativity at the University of Saskatchewan, the Beirut Academy of Advanced African Studies at the University of Beirut, Germany, the McCall Center for Visual Arts in Charlottetown, North Carolina, and most recently at the Mark Bonham Center for Sexual Diversity Studies at the University of Toronto. Please join me in welcoming Abdi Osman.
Thank you, Ted and Rebecca, and all of you for coming tonight. So for the two decades, I have been documenting African life in diaspora. This work has been filtered through African ways of thinking about gender, sexuality that are not pathological. The work has been made in community and with community. I'll talk about this more shortly. To do this work, I have utilized three terms that orient my practice and consciousness. First word is Anis, which is a Somali word, Shoga, Swahili, and David, Somali. These terms cover African queerness and transness. These three terms have been the central prism through which to view my documentary photographic and moving image work. The terms allow me to work with non-heterosexual and gender nonconformity beyond Western conceptions of those practices, which is to say I always work from an African consciousness. It is important for me to note that my work is not fundamentally concerned with speaking back to or even finding affinity with white Western forms of sexuality. And my work is definitely not concerned with diversifying or rectifying white queer exclusion. My subjects might register as appearing to express and to hold all the recognizable patterns of Western queer behavior, but that recognition or those apparent patterns should not be the basis for assuming a shared or common identity. Anis, Shoga, and David all mark the African diasporic presence of queer self being beyond Western markers of gender and sexuality, even in the West. Important too in viewing my work through African language is the pushback against the claims made by African states of none on record. The idea that homosexuality is an African, indeed, recent legislation in Uganda, Ghana, and potentially elsewhere in Africa seek to not just deny African queerness, but to end the very possibility of African queer lives. These forms of appalling legislation result in violence make the projects of documentation not only urgent but also a record of lives lived within and beyond the African nation states. This work has largely but not exclusively centered on documentation beyond the continent, in diaspora, and given that many Caribbean subjects in the work, my work reorients blackness as always already African. In short, the queer African is not bounded by geography nor the nation state. The work that I do is all about community. In this work, because my subjects are from communities that I live in and with, I have been less interested in in styling them and fashioning them on their own terms, on my own terms. The portraiture work is not concerned with an aesthetic that is polished, but rather one that captures the ordinary and everyday. Some of the work is studio produced, but some of it is captured on the move. Indeed, each of these subjects make the decisions about how they would like to be represented. But the work is also playful. In my collage work, I'm able to resituate my subjects in other ways that extend our collective concern for making present African diasporic realized. My process has been to build relationship with my subjects. We hang out for longer than in any particular shoot we take. It is on the basis of community relationship that my subjects become co-creators in my projects. Am I going to do that? The other important dimensions of and to my work is that of Islam. As an African Muslim, I'm forced to continually remind and push back against two tendencies. First one is no queer Muslims, and the second one is the discourse of the brown Muslim body. My art places black-skinned Muslims at the center of the documentary work traveling the anti-black discourses that seek to make African Muslims disappear. At the same time, my work also subtly pushes against the queer Muslims as somehow always taboo. In my work, I have Islam showing up not as a special effect, but as a way of being in the world that opens different kinds of vistas about black being and its many manifestations and meanings. I have been intentional in my work that my images hold as much the attention of my subjects to be represented as my own desire to represent them. It is at the site of art as an intervention that my subjects and I meet. I'm not just making art. This art is also making me in the process. As a multidisciplinary artist, I practice photography, filmmaking, montage, drawing, and painting. My paintings and drawings have been positioned as what I call African primitivism. I work with the definition of primitive art that centers on the idea that the pre-colonial art of the colonized was deemed primitive by the colonizers. The colonial logic and contact African art was ugly, misproportioned, and distorted. Is what I take as an assignment to do my work. Rather than attempt to disapprove the colonial idea of the unattractiveness of African art, I embrace the ugly and the distorted. In my drawings and paintings I practice, I embrace this deformity, different proportion scales, and distorted mishappening bodily parts as ways of countering the discourse of African art as primitive. My drawings and paintings inhabit this African grotesque, turning it against itself and thereby highlighting how African art is another way of seeing the world. So here I'm just going to show you some of my drawings. To draw and paint without the demand for perfection is a liberating act. One that has been practiced by indigenous the indigenous artists and communities for decades within the context of Canadian indigenous art, specifically the Inuit art. So here I have some examples of two indigenous artists, Annie Kudibuk and Shubina Ashona. These two artists also document their indigenous communities. Here, the freeform drawings of artists like Annie Kudibuk and Shubina Ashona inspire me. Indeed, the kind of art that I make is a direct confrontation with the polished and smooth aesthetics of Western modern art. As we now know, European modernist high art had deliberately borrowed or appropriated the aesthetics of the colonized and formerly colonized. In that borrowing, what was considered actually primitive and uninformed is transformed into an intellectual exercise meant to give to European art what it is assumed primitive art would never have. So here you have artwork by Pablo Picasso. My paintings and drawings practice by returning finally to the primitive. To the primitive is a direct engagement with this claim and a rebuking of it at the same time. In my work on primitivism, I work from the opposite end of Kehili Wiley's intervention. If Wiley tends to place the black image of black person in the center of European modernist art and thereby correct its problematics and racist representation, my work takes seriously the idea that no correction is needed. Instead, I seek to proliferate aesthetics differences and new ways of seeing. My drawings and paintings practice is indebted to the works of Mariana Togovnik, I can never pronounce that name. Born Primitive Salvation Intellect, Modern Lives, published in 1990. And Sally Price's Primitive Art in Civilized Spaces, published in 1989. The Myth of Primitivism Perspectives on Art as an Anthology edited by Susan Hiller and the many essays by Kobina Mercer on modernism and blackness. I return to these works continually to ground my practice and the intellectual arguments. The ideas of Max Seeley's decolonizing the camera. Decolonizing the camera and photography in racial times has come to shape my photography and film practice in powerful ways. Seeley argues that Western photography has created violent and racist images of black people. But Seeley also argues that black photographers intervene into the racist, violent imagery with their work too. Seeley's perspective here grounds me and my work. My research agenda is therefore twofold. One, I'm interested in researching the history of African art and how it has both been debased, appropriated, and diminished by Europe, and I engage in an art practice that responds to this debasement. Second, my photographic and film work seeks to draw on and work with the long history of black people's resistance to and with the camera, and our attempt to reanimate the violence the camera has done to us since the birth of a nation. So here's a poster of Birth of a Nation from 1915. Across my career, I have been influenced by Gordon Parks, Isaac Julian, and Rotimi Fanifeo, and other Black filmmakers, photographers, video artists, and installation artists whose filmic works do not only correct representation, but put it into the public sphere, counter representations and new representations. So here you have entitled Photo by Gordon Park from 1963 in New York. And here you have an installation by the Julian's Lessons of the Hour. And here you have Fun Coyote, Watching Coyote, half-open icons from 1989. This is a series of photos collage from my work, a series from 2014. So the research agenda that underwrites my art practice then is that it is committed to challenging and making new forms of representation that were meant to subordinate and subjugate Black people. My work confronts those logics not by offering a proper objective representation, but by simply proliferating different kinds of representation into the public sphere. Stuart Hall has taught us that good and bad representation model is not the most useful model to transform the power of representation. Therefore, there are additional two aspects to my research twofold agenda. In one strand, I look to the history of colonization and primitivism, and I make it through drawings and paintings. And in the second strand, I study the history of film and photography and Black artists in the field to make works both inspired by Black artists and to extend work inspired by Black artists' work and to extend the critique of filmic culture they have engaged and contributed to by also taking film and photography in new and exciting directions. In short, my research agenda is an artistic Black studies program. Some of my recent and ongoing projects include, for example, picturing Black women, just jump to picturing Black women because I think so this is the series picturing Black women. This series emerged from a conversation with a woman who lamented that the trajectory of Black women's contribution are often left out of mainstream discourses of immigration, as well as how the specificity of how their forms of mobility are limitedly emerging. The photographs in this project not only work to provide a corrective to this oversight, but it also illuminates how women who immigrated during the 1960s and 70s eventually sought employment in a range of professions. The 1960s and 70s are key thinking about Black migration to Canada. It was during this period that immigration laws changed, leading to the Immigration Act of 1976. This allowed for more Black migrants to enter Canada and included allowances for the reunification of families. Since the 1980s, Black immigration also shifted predominantly from Caribbean to African populations. While the project initially documented Caribbean women, recent work has turned towards women of African descent, or African heritage, I should say, especially West African women. One factor that has emerged is that a high percentage of African women who arrive in Canada to study have children to remain in Canada. enjoying successful careers in a range of professions. Most of the subjects featured in this project are in the early stages of retirement, and thus I'm not only documenting Black women migrants, but I'm also photographing them as they transition into a new phase of life in Canada. My camera is witness to their becoming, if you will, taking my cues from my subjects. I photograph the women whatever they choose in a range of backdrops and environments. Short captions taken from interviews with the subjects on their unique work and migration narratives supplement the overarching themes of the photograph, which is labor and aging in the specific context of gender Black migration. In the Passport project, I use self-portraiture, specifically the selfie, to document another particular story of movement to Canada and more broadly across the Americas. This work is currently on view in Packard Hall at Colorado College, where it features the Passport as the central figure of spaces and movement in the series of images. Specifically, the Passport series features portraits of the artist alongside his passport printed on large-scale scrolls of linen hung from the ceiling. The images' fragmented spatialities evokes memories of checkpoints and border crossings in the Americas, underscoring the performativity of the passport to both engender as well as inhibit one's transnational movement and sense of national belonging. As an installation, I seek to complicate singular representation and readings of cultural identities, such as Black, queer, trans, and Muslim subjectivities, challenging viewers to imagine the ways of seeing and relating to the world. This is especially important given photography's close relation to what curator Ellen Walker describes as racist state, criminal, and anthropological identification practices used throughout history. Where in contemporary reclamation of the photographic gaze unsettles how we approach reading photographs as we do bodies. I'm just going to show a short clip of this, and then I'll continue.
Quando morì mia nonna, erano molti anni che non la vedevo, per questo non piansi quando morirei dove era sempre vissuta. Piuttosto rimasi sorpresa, poiché la stessa notte, quella della sua morte, l'avevo sognata, ed era la prima volta da quando vivevo in Europa che mia nonna mi compariva in sogno. Anzi, si può dire che non mi comparisse affatto, e improvvisamente l'avevo sognata, proprio la notte della sua morte. Nel sogno mia nonna sciacquava le stoffe nel mare ed era seria, come sempre è stata seria nella sua vita. Al risveglio l'avevo ricordata seria com'era, dritta e dura come un fusto, il buchino stretto in vita, un fazzoletto rosso sulla nuca. Era un ricordo simile a una fotografia in posa, poiché mia nonna non si muoveva, rimaneva fissa su una lunga pertica e intorno aveva il mare, anche se il mare lei l'aveva sempre odiato. Avevo un'amica all'epoca e le raccontai del sogno e della nonna. Non lo raccontare in modo speciale, né cerimonioso né drammatico. Raccontare solo cosa era avvenuto e la mia amica rimase un poco in silenzio e poi disse in modo speciale e cerimonioso e drammatico che ci doveva essere un grande legame tra me e mia nonna.
Okay, here the Gardens of the Mediterranean recently unveiled at the Finance Center at Colorado College. Gardens of the Mediterranean recalls ways in which bodies have been forcefully transported across vast lands and waters, particularly in the Americas. A text by Somali-Italian poet and scholar Cristina Alifara overlays single-channel images of the sea and a veiled woman looking outward from the shore, blending their voices and imagery to the story of immigration across borders as well as territories. The combination of perspective here of the written word, the seated woman's positional view, and of the rolling sounds, motions of waves against shorelines, construct a multifaceted text of migration and immigration stories. For many years, I've been researching and photographing Muslim cultures, in particular as an insider to Islam as both a religion and controversially a culture. I intend to pursue a long-term project on piety. In this project, I'm interested in what Saba Mahmoud, in her book published 2005, has termed the politics of piety. Piety is particularly important to Muslim ideas of themselves, especially females, and it is often complicated by the politics of sexuality. My research will lead to me documenting how African Black Muslims in North America are confronting the questions of HIV/AIDS as part of their current cultural experience. While it is also known that HIV can be acquired in a number of ways, sex and drug addiction remain the main ways in which contraction of the disease is understood. I intend to widely research and document Muslims living with HIV, particularly women and queer Muslims, as well as Muslims working to stem the pandemic, especially queer Muslims and Muslims grappling with the political, cultural, and religious issues involved with the pandemic. The research will focus on how religious tenets like piety complicate this work. This work will be presented in photography and moving images and as an installation. This work comes from a history of working in AIDS advocacy and activism around the documentation and representation of Black, queer, and trans belonging and placemaking. My photographics, let me just show you the rest of the images. My photographic series, Plantation Futures, currently showing at El Museo Gallery, has been shown in many contexts. Most recently, as part of a community-based art project called Wish You Were Here, Wish Here Was Better. In it, a van wrapped in a commissioned artwork by local indigenous artist Les Harper popped up daily at various locations across Mississauga and Brampton, Ontario. Starting at the University of Toronto Mississauga campus, the van served as an anchor for visitors to share reflections and to ask questions about grief, survival, and possibilities. As part of a larger mobile public event series, that makes space for people impacted by the ongoing overdose crisis and its cascading systemic issues of precarity, houselessness, and criminalization. To mourn, while providing opportunities to imagine and work towards a more just future. The project was organized by Zoe Todd, Theodore Carr, and Ellen Walker, and was presented by the Blackwood Gallery at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. And in recent painting works, I have begun turning to images of Black popular culture, Black fashion, and aesthetics from the 70s to the present. This is my last slide. So, go back to this image.
So, all right, thank you so much. Thank you again, folks. Questions? The floor is open. So,
How do you find people that you photograph and for advertising for you?
No, actually, most of the people that are in my photo work are people that have come to know for a long time. And because I've had I have this long kind of friendship with them, long-term kind of friendship. So every time they have somebody new that I don't know about, they usually refer that person to me, right? And that person feels comfortable coming because they're familiar with, like they chat with friends. It's like friends telling you telling your friends that, oh, I've worked with this person, and then they take your word for it, and then they
about the title of your drawing. I'm very curious about the title of the drawing.
Okay, so, yeah, the title, so normally I come with ideas for drawing, and these drawings have been, I decided to do the pandemic because I don't really focus on my work, but I kind of reverted to drawing because of lockdown, and if you're an artist, you always have to, think of something else to create work. And so I started doing these drawings and I haven't stopped, so I've done about close to over 300 drawings so far from 2020 until now. And each of the drawings have kind of come up with a funny kind of name, I'm not a title for it, so that like something very catchy. And then when people mostly fixated not only with the drawing itself, but also the title of it. And the title of them, everyday things that I see when people talk about or something I want to show. That's how I come up with the title. Any other questions? I see some of my former students here. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Is there any relevance behind I noticed that for some of the drawings you colored in the skin color, but for these it's just white. Is there any relevance behind that at all? Or?
So I started drawing with ink and pencil, coloring pencils, and then in 2020 this year I started using watercolor. So that's why some of them are very vibrant. And going forward, I stopped using coloring pencils anymore. I'm just using watercolor instead.
You have a real range of work, some of the documentary work, and especially the passport photos, right? Really heavy, political, very moving. And then you have these wonderful sets of drawings that are in the images you ended with. And I love that green hat. It's amazing. That are more playful and kind of joyful. They're very kind of social in a kind of positive social way. Talk a little bit about having that kind of balance in your own work between kind of tackling kind of political, kind of superstructures, and then the kind of joyful kind of, or they feel kind of joyful drawings that are more playful.
I think before the pandemic, I was open to creating different things that were happening in the world. But during the lockdown, the pandemic lockdown, the only thing you could do is there was no kind of color out there. And you didn't want to, people didn't really want to think of, even individuals didn't really want to think of something heavy because it was already a down kind of period. And so when I started drawing this and coming up with those titles, I would draw something that I would post it on social media. So other people were picking up on it and reading, and looking at the images and reading the captions. And they would send a message there every day that people would send messages like they're waiting for the next one. And some people are telling me that it actually helped them kind of get through the pandemic because they were looking forward to it as well.
Contents of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
They put this title, they could understand it, but a lot of people,
No.
it's another for
Friends of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put that in purpose, because I was thinking about, all those people who perished in the Mediterranean Sea. I see them as people who are full of hope, right? And not just dead people. And so that's why I titled the episode video as Gardens of the Mediterranean.
I'm talking about this title.
Or the subtitle, or the text you mean? That one is from Christina and Ipaka, and then the Somali Italian.
Yeah, I know her, I worked at the picture live, there is no subtitle.
Why there's no subtitle? Because what happened, I also wanted to post the video, I wanted to play with the idea of language. Because like if you're coming from the continent or other parts of the world where people are not speaking European languages, the assumption is you have to know how to speak those languages. So I wanted people to be forced to kind of, think about what exactly it is, right? And not have to have subtitles for them, because when you have people coming from Mexico, other parts of the world that don't speak English and they come to North America, their assumption is you have to speak English. But the opposite could be say true to people who live in North America. People who live in if you don't speak Italian, and somebody speaking Italian to you, you would feel the same way that the expectations of people who don't speak English in this country. That's more like the politics of language as well, right? When you think of migration and immigration.
Because very much the English novels are very wonderful.
Yeah. And the other thing I was also thinking is when I show the work in gallery and context and viewers come, I usually observe the viewers. Sometimes they come, even though they see a woman, a real woman in the image, in the moving image, but they're curious about the language. So I always thought if it was Somali language, when the video was in Somali, people would just come in. As soon as they hear that, they just leave. But I think there's some kind of romanticizing of European languages that people have, even though they don't understand it, or they feel like, I'm going to sit there for the full 14 minutes duration of the video, even though I don't understand it. Questions back? The left side of it.
I appreciate like how versatile you are, because you can do and like do art that deals with a lot of like social issues, but still like lighthearted stuff like this. As an artist, how do you like continue to be versatile like that, where you can do goofy stuff, but also deal with like the social issues and serious stuff?
I think as an artist you have to pivot sometimes. You can't make serious work all the time, sometimes you have to have a balance. And so I think as a student, you should try to have a balance about things that you really are passionate about and things that sometimes you might not be passionate about, but you have a strong opinion. You try to have that balance of putting it together.
I'll ask relatedly, like you move between tones, right, as we talked about, but also between mediums, right? Like drawing, painting, photography, video, installation. Could you talk a little bit about that? How you decide what kind of subject is suited to what medium, or is it challenging or scary to jump into a new medium where you're more comfortable in one or another? Because I feel like that's something that might be relevant to many of our students too as they're experimenting.
So I think, let me just speak for myself, and then maybe you can just gather something from that. In my work, there is some of the work, sometimes I would create different work installation, and the installation would just be sound. And sometimes it would be sounded, but then there's sound, and then the video is silent, right? So for instance, shadow boxing, partly because I was allegedly married from different men. Different kind of like queer people in Toronto. I was recruiting experiences in the city. And some of them we were doing the pandemic, so sometimes I would Zoom with them, or I would send them an audio, like they would record the audio and then they send it to me and I would put it together, right? So you see the audio together. But this video part, because I'm familiar with the environment, so like the recruiting environment, so parks and stuff like that, and I'm familiar with those areas. So I went and took videos of those spaces. But with the spaces, and it's not, if you see the shadow boxing videos, installation is very different because it's almost like you have somebody wearing a full robe, and you can see that person is walking through the side. So there's that, so I had to create from 3 different parts, different kind of scenarios on my own, and then just approach it, and the local thing with the audio for people who have been to different times. They'll see participants, one person will spend more time in one part than the other, and others are familiar with other parts, and all the food and environment. And so I collect them, and that is the amazing thing here. So the video projections on the wall just become almost like they become the cartoons, right? So you sit, and the installation was designed in a way that was the gallery space was designed almost to look like a park. So park benches that you would see in parks in the middle. The lights were dim, right? And the lights were just provided on the benches. And then around the room was covered with the video projection of the parks. But you can tell which park is which, and then those parks are different, and you can tell. And for me, the interesting part of that installation was whenever I took it to different parts of the world, even though it was the park in Toronto and the institute of Toronto, but every place that I took the installation to, people would recognize. They would just replace the parts with the parts that they're familiar with, but the audio and the narrative was exactly what it was. The visual change, but the narrative.
All right, well, thank you so much.